Excellent. Right, so I think this is good to go. So thank you everybody for taking some time out on this Friday evening to listen to my talk. Now, I must hold my hand up and say I am not an expert in condensation and mould, in the fact that I haven't studied this at a college or a university or have an actual recognised certificate. However, having spent nearly 15 years monitoring airflow and utility usage within buildings, and over the last 7 years working with thermal cameras in buildings and studying in my own time the impact of climate change and moisture control within buildings, I think I am fairly well placed to give you a general overview of my thinking of what's going on. And it's very much holistic thinking, and share with you some of my experiences over the last few years of why people have condensation and mould and what they can do about it. So there's a little bit about my background. I've done TV and radio towards energy saving, and fuel poverty and energy saving is something that I'm extremely passionate about, and I understand how houses are heated and how they're ventilated and how you can save money in all of those processes. So this evening I want to do an overview, which is the background to water, air movement and temperature of surfaces. And then I want to talk about properties and are they airtight, watertight, because I want to tell and share some statistics with you. And then internally, can the moisture move evenly and leave the property? And that's the whole crux of if you're seeing some condensation and moisture mould inside the house, why and how can we get rid of it? So I'll take you through this journey now. I only wrote this presentation in the last hour. It's the first time I've ever given one like this before. So I have to admit won't run as smoothly as I would like, but here we go. So basically 3 reasons why you're finding moisture in your home, condensation should I say, or mould in your home is because of water or moisture, heat and ventilation. And the 3 combined are what then gives you mould or condensation in the home. Now this is a sort of a drawing of the ventilation side of a house and all the different ways that energy can come, air can come in and out of a home. Now this is an older home, but it's one that there's tried to be replicated in modern homes as well, where the windows are ventilated, they've got little vents at the top rather than sash and case windows that breathe. Even what's surprising is your electrical outlets, you don't think that there are actually ventilation areas, but they very much are. And in some older homes, there can be drafts as well. So you always have to be very aware in your home as to where the movement of air is coming from and how airtight your property is. And understand that there is that movement that's required. Now in a passive house, which is a brand new sort of super energy efficient house, you only have half an air change an hour. And if there was ever a power cut, you actually have to leave the property because the ventilation is mechanically streamed in. And for you to get healthy air, it has to be electronically created. In a new house, it's not a passive house, but a new house to high standard has it between 4 and 5 air changes an hour. Now that is a legal requirement, and that will give you healthy air, and that will allow the moisture to move around the home, stop any mould from forming, and allow the occupants to be healthy. An older property, particularly pre-1935 or pre-1919, is going to have anything upwards of sort of 10, 15, 20, sometimes 30 air changes an hour. Now the standard is 7.8, and I feel with the climate change that we're having and a lot more moisture in the air, I think around 10 of an air change is going to be something that would be suitable for a property. And that way the air is then changing and moving this moisture around the home. Now I'm hoping that this video works. If it doesn't work, then I'm going to share this link with you for you to hear it again. Now I'm not sure if I can share my, how do I do this? Mute my video, stop my video, rename, pin video. I tell you what I'll do, because I don't want to waste your time this evening. I'll let you just watch this YouTube video on your own time. But what it basically is talking about is what is creating all that moisture in the air. a family of 4 in a week can put an average of 16 litres of moisture into the air, and it has to go somewhere. And is there sufficient ventilation and heat within the house, or is it being trapped somewhere? So please, in your own time, watch that video. And the first is a ventilation advert for a ventilation system, but it just talks about the basics of why ventilation is required. So you will find it very helpful. So this is an area that you're probably not expecting me to talk about, but I'm finding it to being a huge area just now. Water ingress of some sort. So I was speaking to the chairman of the Federation of Master Builders, and he gave me a statistic, which I just couldn't believe that I was hearing it from someone else of that ilk, is 90% of pre-1919 properties are no longer watertight. There is water ingress in some form. So that means only 10% of properties out there that are pre-1919 are actually watertight. And that's a horrific stat. Now, you will probably find you're going to find it difficult to get a roofer or a builder to work on anything to do with exterior, because the need is now getting greater than ever. And I want to talk about how it can have an effect on the condensation in your home. Now, the climate change itself is one of the biggest factors for the water ingress. And our old stone buildings breathe, and the water can come through the stone, and also the water that you're creating from your own lifestyle is inside the home, and it's been trapped in the lath and plaster. And what we're now finding is that this stone that we have in our houses are a lot wetter than it was before. It's harboring moisture. It's basically a sponge. And I'm hearing stories all the time where people are getting moisture coming in from brick that is nearly a metre deep. But it's unfortunately, this is the climate change. We've got very, very wet winters and summers now. It rains all year round, heavy rain all year round. And you find that the humidity levels in summer are through the roof compared to what we're used to. You can't cut the grass now till well after lunchtime, and your clothes that you bring in from the dryer from your clothesline are still wet even in the evening, and they've been out all day in the middle of summer. You're having to finish them off in the house. And that's telling you that there's a change in the climate. Now, that's also telling you that the moisture inside the house is not moving as quickly and out of the property as it used to before. And it is having to cope with more moisture than before. So I want to go through a little bit of a journey just now. And this is what I do when I go into people's properties. I use a thermal camera, and I'm able to bring to life the property in a way that you can't with your own naked eyes. And this is a screenshot of a thermal image that I took in a chap from Braemar in his spare bedroom. Now, he's got terrible condensation on his windows. His windows are streaming of water, and he wanted me to insulate them, which I can do. I'm very good at that. That is my job, my company. We do secondary glazing, we insulate doors and windows. But if we insulate the windows, which are 5.5 of a U value, down to 1.7, which is around the same temperature as the rest of the surfaces in that room. If there's any cold areas, then we will then cause mold or condensation on those areas. So what we have to do is make sure that there's no other areas of the room that are cold, like the windows, but are being hidden because the windows are so extreme. And this came up in one of his bedroom walls. And we couldn't see it to the naked eye, but I said to Mr. Wiley, there's obviously something there. We'll have to go out and investigate, because once that windows are insulated, that area, which is 12 degrees and the rest of the room is sitting at 20 degrees, will then have mold on it, and unfortunately within a matter of months. And I don't want to ever cause mold in someone's property. So when we went outside to Mr. Wiley's house, you'll see this water ingress here. Now, he hasn't done anything wrong. The chimney, the downpipe is clear. There is no moss and there's no leaves blocking the row in here. What is happening, there's little bits of pointing missing, but in general, there's a lot more moisture now hitting this. The east winds are coming much more than before, and they're wet. And it's not getting a chance to dry out. And this is soaking right through the brick, and this is it starting to come into the bedroom. And you're not noticing it because all the condensation, all the extra moisture in the air is going directly to the bedroom windows, or all the windows. But moisture, warm air with moisture when it rises to the colder areas, so it'll always rise upstairs. Now there's a fix to that, which Mr. Wiley was very impressed with, which is where you come along and you put an angle grinder onto the skew. Now this is the skew part of the building, and it runs the water away from the roof and back into the Rowan and down the downpipe. And it's a very quick and easy way without changing the aesthetics of the property. So that's exactly what he did. And he had the little straps pointed, and we loaned him a dehumidifier, which allowed that room to dry out quicker than it would have done naturally. We then insulated his windows on all his property, and then now he has a dry home without any moisture or mold forming on any of the surfaces at all. Now, just to let you know, I'll go back to that slide. I was in a place called Kirkton, which is up beside Forfar, a couple of weeks ago, seeing another customer, and I took my dog for a walk, and I couldn't help but notice these wet patches coming off the skew, exactly the same way as Mr. Wiley. And this is a row of cottages, and it's happening to every single one. On my dog walk, I spoke to a couple of people who live in these cottages who said they got really, really bad mold problems inside these rooms. And they had no idea that it could have come externally. They're thinking that it's something they have done internally, and it's not, it's coming all the way through. So one of the first things this evening I want to get you to do is to actually go and have a look at the way that the water is running off. And this is one of the other cottages. Is it all going off the building, and is the building completely dry? And one of the things that I often find now is the downpipes are just simply not big enough to take away all the water, and it doesn't run away. Now my own house is pre-1919, it's 1901. I'm one of the 90%. At the moment, just now, when it rains really heavy, the drains fill up outside my house, and unfortunately my downpipes can't run away, and I've actually got water pouring over, and it's now coming into my bedroom window, which it never used to before. But there's nothing wrong with my house. It's the fact that the water is no longer running away. So I now have to look at how we can try and solve that, whether it's the council having to do the drain outside, whether we're having to clean our pipes. But yes, unfortunately, I'm one of those. And it is going to have an effect on my property if I don't keep it dry. Now, there is two fantastic guides from Historic Environment Scotland. This one here is little adaptations that you can make, and that's where the photographs there that I showed you came from, was the Climate Change Adaptation Guide. And to actually understand the statistics of what is going to happen and how much more moisture we're going to have in the air, then this is the facts here. And I think it's something like 34.7% more rainfall, more rain when it does come down than we had before. And is your house able to get rid of all of that? So I do encourage you to download these guides, and I know these slides will be shared afterwards. And one thing that we're seeing with our windows is the fact that the Rowans are now overflowing, and they're hitting the windows and they're rotting them quicker. And that moisture can come right into the building, and the same where the downpipes are. So that can be one source of it. So is your buildings actually watertight? The second is, are all the surfaces in the rooms of your home the same temperature? Now, external walls will always be much colder than internal walls. And as long as they're evenly cold, that they will harbour more moisture, and they will be, more than likely lath and plaster, or plaster with wood, and that's where they're going to harbour the moisture. Now, if it's not even and it's concentrated in particular areas, then that's when you can see mould forming, and that's because it is a colder surface. So if you think of warm air rising, so warm air holds moisture, cold air doesn't hold moisture. Warm air holds the moisture. Warm air will always migrate to the coldest parts of a room or a building. And if a room is not heated properly, or not vented properly, or not airflow properly, then that warm moisture is going to head to one particular area, and then it will form the mold on it. Or initially you'll not see it at all, and over time it'll just suddenly appear and you'll not know why. Now, an external wall is much colder than internal, but as I say, if it's evenly spread, you shouldn't see anything. What happened with those cottages are, it was very obvious coming down where it was coming in from outside, and they hadn't even thought that it was coming from outside. They couldn't imagine it coming through their stone. They thought it was something internally that they had done wrong. Now, thermal comfort is very important, and you can't have a drafty house. You just have to ventilate your home. And for you to be comfortable in your home, you don't want to have more than 4 degrees of a difference between where your feet are and your head is. And if there is, then that's when you can feel uncomfortable. So you want to make sure that the ventilation you have coming in is controlled and not out of control. So you can turn it on and off, as in a vent, close it and open it, and shut and close and open a window, as opposed to a gaping hole under a kitchen sink that isn't in control. So it's understanding the comfort. So I don't advocate having a really leaky home. And that video talks about the ventilation and how much you need within a home, and how you need to control it. Now, then I'm talking about is the moisture getting out. So the first of all is the water getting in, which we've covered. Then we're looking at is the moisture getting out. So internal moisture can be created by a number of things, and not just the climate change itself. It could be us drying clothes, it can be lids on pans, it could be showers and baths, it can even be breathing. Do you know we give out ½ a litre of water a night just by breathing ourselves? So a couple of people in a main bedroom, a litre of water, think of that as a jug. That has to go somewhere. And what started off my journey in researching this about 6 years ago, I've lived in this property now 14 years. And when I woke up in the morning, unfortunately my glass is okay, but around my window frames are the coldest part of my house. I've had my windows replaced with double glazing from single glaze, and they've been replaced really badly, and there's big gaps around the frame. And that's the coldest place, and all the moisture goes to those areas and forms actual puddles of water. And I would open my windows in the morning to dry and air my room, and I'd come back at night and there was still puddles of water there. And I thought, there's something happening here. There's something changing in this environment. And that's when I started to research it. And I started to understand that the climate change is happening and the moisture, the damp outside is there. Now, you'll probably all agree with me that you're seeing a lot more moss all over buildings now that you wouldn't have expected before, and all year round, not necessarily in the damp sort of winter months, but actually in the summer months as well. Now, that means that your internal moisture is not going to be going out as quickly as it was before. So a combination of increased internal moisture along with areas of a home that unfortunately then are also hit by moisture coming in or are unevenly cold will then start to create a lot more condensation and a lot more mold. Now, the condensation I would imagine that you're seeing in your home is going to be mostly on the windows, and that could be double or single glaze. And that's because the U value, which is the rate that you work out how much a surface absorbs the heat, is actually much higher than other surfaces. Now, a U value is like a golf score, the lower the better. Now, a single glaze window is 5.5. which means 95% of the heat that hits that goes straight through and only 5% is repelled. So a lot of moisture will be dissipated on single glaze windows. Double glazing doesn't always mean it's superb, and depending on the age and the quality of the double glazing, it can still be around 3 of a U value, and the rest of the surfaces in that room or the home are going to be 1, 1.5, 2. So that moisture is going to dissipate on the windows because it becomes the coldest area. Even although you think it's actually well insulated, it's still a weak point. And that moisture has to go somewhere. So the way to get it out is a combination of ventilation, and I don't mean out of control, I mean controlled, so you can regulate how much is coming in, because you're having to pay for that heat every time it changes. Heating the house. Now, if there isn't enough heat going in the property, then you're not going to get that moisture moving. And that moisture is going to build up and cause condensation, then eventually mold. And the third thing is dehumidification. And I don't just mean the little crystals sitting around. I mean a plug-in, something quite serious, a plug-in dehumidifier, but a low energy using one, something like a 240 watt. This is mine here in my hallway. I have 2 in my house now, but this is the one upstairs that runs every day so that in the evening we're not put off by the noise, and it's on a timer. And you've got a little sort of container at the bottom there that you can collect the water. And I get half a bucket of that every single day, which I then put into a larger water butt, which I dry my plants with, and try to reuse it as much as I can. Now, it's 240 watts. That's equivalent of around 3 old light bulbs that you would have. So it's not that high energy using. But what I do have is I have quite a dry house now. My humidity level is around 45, which is a very safe, comfortable level to live in. And my house heats up in less than an hour, and it stays warm for longer. And I have it at 20 degrees, but not all the time. just when I'm at home and we need it. You can see I'm wearing a fleece just now. The house itself is not as warm as it should be, but it's heating up now. So it's understanding the house and how to maintain an appropriate temperature. Now, if you do already have mold in the house, what can you do with it? Well, you have to find the source and you have to try to mitigate that happening again. But to hide it, you can use something like insulating wallpaper that will insulate the area that is causing the problem, but also hide it for yourselves as well. And it's breathable, and it allows what's called open cell. It allows moisture to travel all the way through, but it's warm, and it will warm up that surface. And it can take an external wall that was 7 degrees to around 4 to 5 degrees, and that's making it closer to the temperature as the internal walls. So it's like putting a jacket on your walls, basically. Another thing to hide it with is just paint itself. And that's a stain blocking paint, and it will give you a 7-year lifespan to be able to block that mold. And thirdly, if you don't want, or it's on your windows, you don't want to sort of hide it or paint over it, don't use a household cloth. Do not, because the spores and the mold are very, very hazardous for our health. Use something like baby wipes that you can then just put straight in the bucket, and you're not actually contaminating the rest of the house. Now, is it warm enough to move the moisture? So that's what I would say is you need the heat in the house to be able to move the moisture. And it is important to heat a home. I haven't had enough time to put all the photographs on. I'll put this on before I share the slides. But again, I surveyed another property in Perth a few weeks ago, and I looked down on a street, and one particular house's roof is covered in mold. Moss. Just like you could just grow everything out of it. And I asked the homeowner, and she said, well, that person died 3 years ago and the house is laying empty. And you can see the difference in that property between the others in the street that haven't been heated, that have been heated. You can see already the house is starting to deteriorate. So you need to heat a home up. And if you have rooms that you don't heat, then that's when the moist, damp air are going to migrate to and cause you more problems. You have to have as much of an even flow as possible. That's affordable. And if you do have rooms that are not heated as well, then please ventilate them so you are getting more moisture movement through them. And is it breathing well? Is any moisture being trapped in any particular areas? And most of the time when I go out to households and I see furniture against external walls, the lath and plaster or the plaster is to bring it out so that you're allowing the airflow around to stop any of the condensation from being trapped and moving to those cold surfaces. Now, that's me for this evening. I think I've covered what I wanted to cover. As I say, I only wrote this an hour ago. So we can all unmute ourselves and I can start answering some of your questions.